On a spring night in Glasgow, Scotland, a young woman stepped out of a nightclub and vanished into the darkness. This is the story of Karen Buckley, a nursing student whose life was cut devastatingly short, and the calculated killer who destroyed her future. Karen Buckley was born in 1993 in Cork, Ireland, growing up in the small rural village of Mourneabbey, north of Cork City. This tight-knit farming community was where everyone knew each other and families looked out for one another. Karen was the youngest of 4 children and the only daughter of John and Marion Buckley. Growing up with 3 older brothers in the peaceful Irish countryside, Karen developed a warm personality that everyone remembered fondly. She spent her childhood at the village community centre, playing with siblings and friends among Ireland's rolling green hills. Those who knew Karen describe her as exceptionally kind and thoughtful, always ready with a smile and eager to help others. The Buckley family was religious, attending church regularly, and these values of compassion shaped Karen's character from an early age. At St. Mary's Secondary School, Karen proved academically capable and remarkably social. Making friends came naturally. She was outgoing, warm and genuine, maintaining deep connections with classmates and spending time together exploring shared interests. Karen had direction and ambition. From a young age, she wanted to help people and make a tangible difference. This calling led her to nursing, perfectly aligned with her compassionate nature. After secondary school, Karen enrolled at the University of Limerick to study nursing. While pursuing her degree, she worked as a waitress at a local hotel, demonstrating the work ethic that characterized her young adult life. After years of dedication, Karen graduated as a registered nurse. But this was just the beginning. She wanted to excel and specialize. Karen moved to England, taking her first professional position at the Royal Alexandra Hospital. During this time, she discovered a passion for occupational therapy, which focuses on helping people develop, recover, or maintain daily living skills. Determined to specialize, Karen researched programs and discovered the University of Glasgow offered an excellent master's in occupational therapy. In January 2015, at 24 years old, Karen moved to Glasgow to begin her program. It was a fresh start, and Karen approached it with characteristic optimism. Glasgow, Scotland's largest city with over 600,000 people, stood in stark contrast to Karen's quiet village. She moved into a shared apartment with 3 students and adapted remarkably well. She dedicated herself to her studies while embracing social aspects of student life, making friends quickly with fellow international students navigating a new city. On weekends, Karen and friends explored Glasgow, trying restaurants, visiting attractions, and going to clubs. These weren't reckless nights, but normal graduate student experiences. By April 2015, after 3 months, Karen was settling in and building her new life. April 11th, 2015 started as an ordinary Saturday. Karen and friends planned to visit a nightclub called Sanctuary, arriving around 11:45 p.m. For hours, everything was normal. Karen chatted with friends, laughed, danced, and had drinks. Nothing suggested anything was wrong. But after 1 a.m., something changed. Karen told friends she was going to the bathroom. They nodded and thought nothing of it. But Karen never went to the bathroom. She left the club entirely, walking into the cold Glasgow night without her jacket. Why would Karen suddenly leave without telling anyone? Why leave her jacket behind? To this day, nobody knows. Even with her case solved and killer brought to justice, this mystery remains. Did something make her uncomfortable? Did she receive a disturbing message? We'll never know. When friends noticed Karen hadn't returned, they weren't immediately alarmed. In a crowded nightclub, possibly having had drinks themselves, they assumed she felt unwell and went home. It seemed logical. The next day, Sunday, April 12th, real concern set in. Karen's roommates realized she hadn't come home. Her bed was untouched. Her phone went to voicemail. She wasn't responding to messages. Her social media showed no activity. This was completely out of character for Karen, normally very communicative. Karen's friends agreed something was seriously wrong. They contacted police to report her missing. Glasgow police didn't treat this as just another late night. Something about the circumstances raised red flags. A responsible 24-year-old graduate student doesn't simply vanish. Investigators had to act quickly. Within hours, Karen's parents in Ireland were notified. John and Marion Buckley received every parent's nightmare. Their daughter was missing in a foreign country. Within days, they flew to Glasgow to help search. The investigation moved quickly. Police canvassed the area, interviewed friends, and reviewed security footage. What they found was chilling. Cameras captured Karen leaving Sanctuary at approximately 1 a.m. But she wasn't alone. Walking beside her, engaged in conversation, was a man. He appeared to be talking as they walked away from the club, not toward Karen's apartment. This changed everything. Karen hadn't wandered off alone. Someone had engaged her and convinced her to walk with him into the night. The search intensified. Karen's face appeared on broadcasts across Scotland and Ireland. Her family organized search parties. Volunteers combed through Glasgow. Social media spread her photo widely. Everyone hoped she'd be found alive. But as days passed, that hope faded. Police quickly identified the man from footage. Alexander Pacteau, a 21-year-old Glasgow resident. Days after Karen's disappearance, detectives went to his apartment. The moment they entered, investigators noticed something strange, an overwhelming smell of bleach and cleaning products. The apartment reeked of disinfectant as if freshly cleaned. This immediately raised suspicions. Why would someone's apartment smell so strongly unless they were eliminating evidence? During this first interview, Pacteau told his version. He claimed he approached Karen outside the nightclub, chatted, and convinced her to come to his apartment. According to Pacteau, they had consensual relations. Then Karen left on foot around 4 a.m. To experienced investigators, almost nothing rang true. Why would sensible Karen, who told friends she was going to the bathroom, suddenly leave with a stranger? Why go to his apartment without telling anyone? And if Karen left alive, where was she now? Searching more thoroughly, police discovered blood-stained bedsheets. Pacteau had an explanation ready. Karen accidentally hit her head on the bed frame. Just a small accident, he insisted. Despite explanations, Pacteau became the primary suspect. Police placed him in custody while gathering evidence. Another troubling find was a handwritten note containing everything Pacteau told police, his story written point by point. This suggested premeditation and calculation, as if he'd written it to memorize and avoid contradictions. While Pacteau sat in custody, investigation continued. Detectives searched for Karen, hoping she might be alive, while building their case. The next discovery came when police found Karen's belongings. Her purse and contents were near Dosholm Park, opposite direction from her apartment. This contradicted Pacteau's claim that Karen headed home. Why would her belongings be opposite direction unless deliberately disposed? The breakthrough came from Pacteau's co-worker, who told police Pacteau rented storage at a farm in High Cregton for pyrotechnic supplies and fireworks. This gave investigators a specific location to search, somewhere outside the city where he could have taken a body. On April 16, 2015, 5 days after disappearance, police descended on High Cregton Farm. What they found confirmed worst fears. Inside a barrel on the property, investigators discovered Karen Buckley's body. The young nurse who came to Glasgow with hope and ambition was dead. She had been murdered. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Karen had been struck multiple times with a heavy object, suffering fatal injuries. With Karen's body found and clear murder evidence, Pacteau's story collapsed. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he eventually confessed, though the truth was even more disturbing. The real story was far darker. After leaving Sanctuary, Pacteau convinced Karen to his apartment. But what happened wasn't consensual. Pacteau attacked Karen with a spanner, a heavy wrench. He struck her head repeatedly, inflicting fatal trauma. After murdering Karen, Pacteau covered up his crime with methodical precision. He purchased a barrel and filled it with chemicals, including caustic soda, attempting to dissolve Karen's body and eliminate evidence. He transported her to High Creighton Farm and placed her remains in the barrel. Pak To wasn't done. He returned to his apartment and cleaned extensively with bleach, eliminating blood and forensic evidence. This was the source of that overwhelming chemical smell investigators noticed. He took blood-stained bedsheets and burned them. He disposed of the murder weapon, throwing the spanner in a river while driving to the farm. Finally, demonstrating both guilt consciousness and cold calculation, Pak To had his car cleaned and placed an online advertisement to sell it. He was eliminating forensic evidence and distancing himself from anything connecting him to Karen's murder. As the case solidified, investigators examined Pak To's background. What they discovered was deeply troubling. This wasn't his first time attacking a woman. He had documented history of predatory behavior the justice system failed to stop. In 2011, 4 years before Karen's murder, Pak To was accused of attempting to sexually assault another young woman in Glasgow. The circumstances were strikingly similar. Pak To met this woman in early morning hours of November 27, 2011, after she left a nightclub called Garage. Using the same tactics he'd later employ with Karen, Pak To gained the woman's trust. He said he was looking for a taxi and convinced her to share one. But in a secluded alleyway, Pak To attacked. He allegedly forced her to the ground, covered her mouth, and attempted sexual assault. The woman's screams attracted passers-by who ran to help. They found the young woman covered in mud, clearly traumatized. Pak To tried to flee, hiding behind a transit van, but was arrested. He was charged with attempted rape. This should have been when the justice system protected other women from Pak To. But that didn't happen. When the case went to trial in 2013, Pak To pleaded not guilty. His defense was brazen and manipulative. He claimed such attacks were cowardly and he'd rather be accused of murder. He said if he'd done it, he would have admitted it. He insisted he always thought before acting and wouldn't risk serious penalties. Pak To offered an alternative explanation. He claimed the woman hit him when he asked about her boyfriend and they fell behind a car with him on top accidentally. He said he ran because he was confused and scared. In a particularly manipulative twist, Pak To told the jury he was gay, seemingly suggesting this made him unlikely to sexually assault a woman. But before proper adjudication, technical problems derailed the trial. The court's sound system malfunctioned, meaning the jury couldn't properly hear the victim's testimony. This, combined with delays from a severe car accident Pak To had been in, led to the case being dismissed. The 2012 car accident was serious, leaving Pak To in a coma for 4 weeks with broken ribs and hip. He couldn't walk for 6 months and used crutches for a year. His defense tried using this to suggest mental health issues, though medical professionals found him mentally sound and fully capable of trial. But the technical difficulties gave Pak To's defense the opening they needed. With the jury unable to hear key testimony, the case fell apart. Charges were dropped, and Pak To walked free. This justice system failure had fatal consequences. If Pak To had been convicted in 2013, he'd have been in prison in April 2015. Karen Buckley would still be alive. Understanding who Pak To was helps explain, though doesn't excuse, his violence. Pak To was 21 when he murdered Karen. He came from a middle-class family and attended a prestigious secondary school, suggesting educational advantages. His parents separated when he was young after his father's business failed. Pak To lived primarily with his mother, though this arrangement was unstable. Despite his privileged background, Pak To developed a pattern of dishonesty and crime. The year before murdering Karen, he was convicted of printing counterfeit tickets. Police raided his apartment after an anonymous tip. Pak To explained he'd been in a car accident and was too embarrassed to admit receiving disability benefits. So he pretended to run a successful business and printed fake tickets to maintain this illusion. At 17, Pak To attempted to start a furniture business, but it failed. This failure, combined with injuries and inability to maintain honest employment, led him down a path of deception and petty crime. For ticket fraud, Pak To avoided jail, ordered to complete 225 hours community service. Once again, the system gave him a second chance. Once again, he proved he didn't deserve it. Alexander Pak To was charged with Karen Buckley's murder. Given overwhelming evidence, including her body, forensic evidence, witness testimony, and his confession, Pak To faced an impossible situation. There was no credible way to claim innocence. In September 2015, Pak To appeared in court and pleaded guilty to murdering Karen Buckley. By pleading guilty, he avoided a lengthy trial that would have forced Karen's family through detailed testimony about her final moments. At sentencing, the full scope of Pak To's crimes and calculated cover-up were laid bare. The judge heard about his methodical evidence disposal, lies to police, and complete lack of remorse. In November 2015, Alexander Pak To was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 23 years before parole consideration. He'll be at least 44 before the possibility of release, and given the crime's nature, may spend life behind bars. The judge's sentencing remarks made clear the severity of what Pak To did. He brutally murdered a young woman with her entire life ahead. He robbed Karen of her future, her family of their daughter and sister, and society of the contributions she would have made as an occupational therapist. Even with Pak To behind bars, several troubling questions remain unanswered. First, and most haunting, why did Karen leave the nightclub? She told friends she was going to the bathroom but walked out without her jacket. Did something make her uncomfortable? Did she receive a disturbing message? Was she feeling unwell? This remains one of the case's most frustrating mysteries. Second, was the meeting between Karen and Pak To truly random, or had he been stalking her? Some investigators believe Pak To may have been watching Karen inside the nightclub, identifying her as a potential victim before she left. Security footage shows Pak To standing near his car with his phone, seemingly waiting and watching who would exit alone. This suggests premeditation that makes the crime even more chilling. Third, why did Pak To kill Karen? Unlike the 2011 case where he attempted sexual assault, there was no evidence of sexual assault in Karen's case. So what was his motive? Forensic psychologists believe Pak To may have killed Karen simply because he wanted to, because he derived satisfaction from having complete power over another person, from taking a life. This makes him not just a murderer, but potentially a serial killer in the making who was stopped after his first successful kill. Some investigators believe Pak To had been fantasizing about killing someone for a long time, that April 11th, 2015 was when he made those fantasies reality. The methodical way he attempted to cover up the crime, the chemicals and barrel ready to dispose of a body, suggests this wasn't entirely spontaneous. The impact of Karen Buckley's murder extended far beyond her immediate family, though they bore the heaviest burden of grief. Karen's parents, John and Marion Buckley, have described Alexander Pak To as pure evil and a coward, words that feel entirely appropriate. The Buckley family has had to live with not just the loss of their daughter, but horrific knowledge of how she died. Karen didn't die peacefully. She was attacked, beaten to death by a stranger she had trusted enough to walk with. Every parent's worst nightmare became the Buckley family's reality. For Karen's friends, particularly those with her that night at Sanctuary, the guilt and trauma have been immense. They've had to live with knowing they didn't realize Karen was missing until too late. Rationally, they know there was nothing they could have done differently, that Pak To's actions were entirely his responsibility. But guilt doesn't always respond to logic. The case raised serious questions about Scottish justice system failures. If Pak To had been properly convicted for the 2011 attempted sexual assault, he would have been in prison in April 2015. Karen would have completed her master's in occupational therapy. She would have helped countless patients recover from injuries and illnesses. She would have lived the long, full life she deserved. Instead, technical difficulties and delays caused by Pak To's accident allowed him to escape justice for his earlier crime. The woman he attacked in 2011 was brave enough to come forward, testify, and face her attacker in court, only to have the justice system fail her. And that failure ultimately cost Karen Buckley her life. Karen Buckley's story is a tragedy on multiple levels. It's the story of a young woman full of promise, whose life was cut short by senseless violence. It's the story of how one man's evil actions destroyed not just one life, but shattered an entire family and community. It's also a story about how justice system failures can have fatal consequences. Karen moved to Glasgow with dreams of advancing her career and helping others. She was described by everyone as kind, compassionate, and caring. She represented the best of what humanity can be. Alexander Pacto represents the worst. He's a predator who had already shown he was dangerous, who had already attacked one woman, and who was allowed to remain free to kill another. Today, Karen's family continues to remember her not as a victim, but as the vibrant, loving person she was. They've established memorial funds in her name to help other nursing students pursue their dreams, ensuring Karen's legacy is one of helping others, just as she always wanted. Alexander Pacto remains in prison where he belongs. He will spend decades behind bars, possibly the rest of his life, paying for what he did to Karen Buckley. But no amount of prison time can bring Karen back. No sentence can restore what was taken from her family. Justice, in cases like this, feels impossibly inadequate. Karen Buckley was 24 years old when she was murdered. She should be alive today. She should be working as an occupational therapist, helping patients rebuild their lives. She should be spending time with her family in Ireland, making new memories with her brothers, parents, and friends. She should have had the chance to fall in love, to marry, to have children if she wanted. She should have had 60 more years ahead. Instead, she has a grave in Ireland and a family that will never stop grieving. This is the tragedy of Karen Buckley. This is why we must remember her story, not just to memorialize a victim, but to remember a promising young woman whose light was extinguished far too soon by a man who should never have been free to harm anyone. Karen Buckley's life mattered. Her death matters. And her story, painful as it is to tell, matters too.